There's a specific moment that happens to a lot of people around 3 in the morning. You're lying there, staring at the ceiling, and your mind starts running through scenarios. The car could break down. The laptop might die. What if you lose your job? What if there's a medical emergency? What if? What if? What if? And here's the thing. These aren't irrational fears. They're real possibilities that could happen to anyone. But there's something interesting about this 3 a.m. anxiety. It doesn't affect everyone equally. Some people experience this every night, while others rarely think about it at all. The difference isn't income. I've seen people making $100,000 a year who lie awake worrying about money, and I've seen people making $45,000 who sleep soundly. So what separates them? There's a specific dollar amount that seems to create this shift, and most people don't realize how low that number actually is.
It's not $1 million, it's not even $100,000. The number is $10,000. And before you dismiss that as just another arbitrary financial milestone, there's actual psychology and mathematics behind why this specific amount changes everything. Let me show you what I mean. But first, we need to understand what life looks like without this amount saved, because the contrast is what makes the transformation so clear. Picture yourself at the grocery store. You're standing in the cereal aisle, and there's a split-second calculation happening in your head. Name brand is $5.49, generic is $2.99. You know the name brand tastes better, but that's $2.50 that could go towards something else. So you grab the generic. Same thing happens in the pasta aisle. Same thing with coffee, bread, snacks. Now imagine your friends text you for dinner on Friday. There's that restaurant everyone's been talking about, but you know entrees are probably $25 each, plus drinks, tip. You're looking at $40 minimum, which means you need an excuse. Oh, I'm not feeling great that day, or I've got so much work to catch up on. Anything except admitting that $40 would throw off your entire budget for the week.
This is the reality for millions of people. Every financial decision becomes a calculation. Every unexpected expense feels like a potential disaster. You're constantly playing defense with your money instead of making proactive choices about your future. But here's where it gets interesting. There's a specific psychological shift that happens when you accumulate your first $10,000, and it has nothing to do with buying expensive things. Most people who reach this milestone don't dramatically change their spending habits at all. The real transformation is much more subtle. The first thing that changes is your relationship with risk. When you have zero savings, every decision feels dangerous. Taking a new job, moving to a different city, even planning a vacation becomes a source of stress because you know one wrong move could leave you financially devastated.
But when you have $10,000 sitting in your account, those same decisions feel manageable. You're not going to quit your job tomorrow and become a professional juggler, but you might finally ask for that promotion you've been thinking about. You might invest in a certification that could boost your earning potential. The safety net doesn't make you reckless. It gives you permission to think beyond just surviving until the next paycheck. Now, here's something most people don't know. There's a biological component to this shift. Neuroscientists have found that financial security actually reduces cortisol levels in your body. Cortisol is your primary stress hormone, and when it's constantly elevated, it affects everything: your sleep, your decision-making, your health, your relationships. This means reaching $10,000 doesn't just change your finances. It literally changes how your body responds to daily challenges. Think about the last time you had a car problem. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, that check engine light might as well be a countdown timer to financial disaster. You're immediately stressed about how you'll pay for repairs, whether you'll need to put it on a credit card, whether you'll have to borrow from family. But when you have $10,000 saved, that same check engine light becomes a simple inconvenience. You're annoyed, sure, but you're not panicked. And this shift from panic to mild annoyance might seem small, but it has ripple effects throughout your entire life. When you're not constantly worried about money, you make better decisions in general. You sleep better. You're more productive at work. You're more patient with family and friends. Financial stress affects every aspect of human behavior, and removing that stress unlocks mental energy you can redirect toward actually improving your situation. But here's what most people miss about the $10,000 milestone. The majority of the benefit doesn't come from spending the money. It comes from knowing the money is there.
Financial experts call this the emergency fund effect, and it's probably one of the most underrated concepts in personal finance. An emergency fund isn't really about the emergencies. It's about the peace of mind that comes from knowing you can handle emergencies. Most people who build up $10,000 in savings never actually spend it on emergencies. Instead, they spend it on opportunities. They invest in education. They start businesses. They move to better locations. Or they simply have the mental bandwidth to focus on increasing their income because they're not constantly worried about basic survival. There's also a confidence factor that's hard to quantify but impossible to ignore. When you know you have money in the bank, you carry yourself differently. You negotiate better. You're more willing to walk away from bad deals because you're not desperate. This confidence often leads to better job opportunities, better relationships, and better life outcomes in general. Not because having money magically solves problems, but because financial security removes the fear that makes people accept less than they deserve. Now, $10,000 might sound like an impossible amount to save if you're currently struggling to put away even $100 per month. But here's what's interesting about human psychology. The hardest part isn't saving the money itself. The hardest part is developing the identity of someone who saves money. Most people approach saving like it's a temporary diet. They cut expenses dramatically for a few months, save aggressively, then burn out and go back to their old spending
spending habits. But the people who successfully reach $10,000 don't think of saving as a temporary sacrifice. They think of it as becoming a different type of person. This identity shift is crucial because it affects every financial decision you make. When you see yourself as someone who saves money, you start noticing opportunities to reduce expenses that you never saw before. You become more creative about finding additional income sources. You start thinking long-term instead of just focusing on immediate gratification. And here's the beautiful thing about this process. It gets easier as you go. Saving your first $1,000 is brutal. It requires significant lifestyle changes and constant willpower. But saving your second $1,000 is noticeably easier because you've already developed the habits and mindset. By the time you're working toward your fifth or sixth $1,000, the process feels almost automatic. The muscle memory is there. The identity is established. You're not fighting yourself anymore. There's also a mathematical reality that makes $10,000 particularly powerful. This amount of money can cover the vast majority of unexpected expenses that derail people financially. Car repairs, medical bills, job loss, family emergencies. Most of these situations can be handled with less than $10,000, which means once you reach this milestone, you're effectively immune to most of the financial disasters that keep people stuck in the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. Not all of them, but most of them. And that's a significant shift. But perhaps the most significant change that happens when you save your first $10,000 is how you start thinking about money itself. Instead of viewing money as something that just disappears from your paycheck every month, you start seeing it as a tool that multiplies your options. Before you have savings, money feels scarce and finite. Every dollar spent is a dollar gone forever. But when you have $10,000 working as your financial foundation, you begin to understand that money can actually create more money. This is where people start getting interested in concepts like investing, side hustles, and passive income. Not because they suddenly became financial geniuses, but because they finally have the mental space to think beyond just covering their basic expenses. When you're not constantly worried about rent money, you can start wondering about retirement accounts. When you're not stressed about grocery bills, you can start researching stock market investments. The bandwidth opens up. Here's something that might surprise you. The person with $10,000 saved is actually closer to financial independence than someone with zero savings, even if that second person earns twice as much money. Why? Because the saver has developed the most important skill in wealth building, and it's not earning money, it's keeping money. You probably know people who make six-figure salaries but are somehow always broke. They drive expensive cars, live in fancy apartments, eat at restaurants that charge $20 for a salad, but they have no savings whatsoever. Meanwhile, you might know someone who makes $40,000 a year but has managed to accumulate substantial savings by being intentional about their spending. The difference isn't income, it's mindset. And reaching $10,000 in savings is like a masterclass in developing the right financial mindset. You learn to distinguish between wants and needs. You become skilled at finding ways to reduce expenses without feeling deprived. Most importantly, you develop the patience to delay gratification, which is probably the single most valuable financial skill anyone can learn. Now let's talk about what $10,000 can actually do for you in practical terms. Because understanding the psychology is one thing, but seeing the concrete applications makes it real. First, it covers almost any car repair short of needing a completely new engine. Most automotive emergencies cost between $500 and $3,000. Transmission issues, brake replacements, major electrical problems, they fall within this range. With $10,000 in the bank, car problems shift from financial disasters to minor inconveniences. Medical emergencies become manageable too. Even without great insurance, most urgent care visits, emergency room trips, or minor procedures fall within this range. You're not going to cover major surgery with $10,000, but you can handle the vast majority of health issues that pop up unexpectedly, and that matters more than people realize. Job loss, which is probably the scariest financial scenario for most people, becomes something you can actually survive. $10,000 gives you roughly 3 to 6 months of breathing room to find new employment, depending on your expenses, and that's enough time to be selective about your next opportunity instead of desperately accepting the first offer that comes along. But here's where it gets really interesting. Having $10,000 doesn't just protect you from disasters, it actually creates opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise. Maybe you hear about a certification program that could boost your salary by $10,000 annually, but it costs $2,000 up front. Without savings, this is impossible. You can't take advantage of it no matter how good the opportunity is. With your financial foundation, it's an obvious investment. Or perhaps a friend mentions they're starting a business and looking for a small investor. Without savings, you can only wish them luck. With $10,000, you have the option to participate in something that could potentially change your financial trajectory. I'm not saying you should invest your entire emergency fund in risky ventures, but having options feels incredibly different from having no options at all. The psychological shift is significant. The impact extends beyond just financial decisions too. When you have money saved, you sleep better. And I mean this literally. Studies show that people with emergency funds report significantly better sleep quality than those without savings. Turns out, financial stress is one of the leading causes of insomnia, and eliminating that stress has immediate health benefits. Better sleep means better focus. Better focus means means better performance at work. Better performance leads to raises and promotions. The compound effect is real. Your relationships improve as well. Money stress is cited as one of the primary causes of divorce and family conflict. When you're not constantly worried about bills, you have more emotional energy to invest in the people you care about. You're less irritable, less anxious, more present in your interactions with others.
There's also something worth mentioning about the confidence boost that comes with having money in the bank. You walk into job interviews differently when you know you don't desperately need the position. You're more likely to negotiate salary and benefits because you're not operating from a place of fear. This confidence often results in better job offers and higher compensation, creating a positive feedback loop that accelerates your financial progress. The person with savings gets better opportunities, which leads to more savings, which leads to even better opportunities. But let's address the elephant in the room. $10,000 might sound like an enormous amount of money if you're currently living paycheck to paycheck, and I'm not going to pretend it's easy to save. But here's the good news. You don't need to save it all at once. In fact, trying to save too aggressively often backfires because it's not sustainable. The most successful savers start with ridiculously small amounts, maybe $50 per month, maybe even $25. The key is consistency, not the size of the initial contribution. Once you build the habit of saving something every month, you can gradually increase the amount as your income grows or as you find ways to reduce expenses. The habit is what matters. The identity shift is what creates lasting change. Here's a reality check that might motivate you. The average American spends over $3,000 per year on coffee, dining out, and convenience purchases. That's not even counting major expenses like car payments or entertainment subscriptions. If you could redirect just 1/3 of that spending towards savings, you'd have your $10,000 in less than 3 years. I'm not suggesting you should never enjoy a coffee or eat at a restaurant, but most people have more flexibility in their budgets than they realize. The difference between someone who builds savings and someone who doesn't usually comes down to awareness and intentionality, not income level. It's about paying attention to where your money goes and making conscious choices about what matters most. Now, let me tell you about something called decision fatigue. It sounds like corporate buzzword nonsense, but it's actually a real psychological phenomenon that affects your life every single day. Every day, you make thousands of tiny financial decisions. Should I buy the generic pasta or the name brand? Can I afford to grab lunch today or should I pack a sandwich? Is it worth paying for premium gas or will regular be fine? Each of these micro decisions burns mental energy, and by the end of the day, you're exhausted from constantly calculating whether you can afford things. This mental exhaustion affects everything else you do. Your work performance suffers, your patience with loved ones decreases, you're too tired to make good decisions about the things that actually matter. But here's what happens when you have $10,000 in the bank. Suddenly, 90% of these daily financial decisions become irrelevant. You're not choosing between generic and name brand pasta because you're worried about your bank account. You're choosing based on what you actually prefer. This might seem like a small thing, but imagine how much mental energy you'd free up if you stopped having to make survival-based calculations 50 times per day. That energy can be redirected toward your career, your relationships, your health, your goals. I know someone who told me that the first time they walked into a grocery store after hitting $10,000 in savings, they almost cried. Not because they went crazy and bought caviar and champagne, but because they realized they could focus on what they actually wanted to eat instead of what they could afford to eat. That's a level of freedom most people don't even realize they're missing until they experience it. And once you experience it, you can't go back. You understand viscerally what financial security feels like. Now, let's get real about something that financial advisors don't always emphasize. Having $10,000 saved doesn't make you rich. It doesn't mean you can quit your job and become a professional beach volleyball player. You're still going to think twice before buying a $1,000 gadget you don't really need. But what it does give you is breathing room. And breathing room is the foundation of every good financial decision. When you're not gasping for financial air, you can actually think strategically about your money instead of just reacting to whatever crisis pops up next. Maybe you notice your car insurance renewal is coming up and you actually have time to shop around for better rates instead of just accepting whatever they send you. Maybe you realize your phone plan is ridiculously expensive and you can switch to something cheaper without worrying about switching fees. These optimizations might only save you $50 or $100 per month, but when you're not stressed about money, you're more likely to notice these opportunities. And those small optimizations compound over time into serious savings that make your next financial goal even more achievable. Here's something interesting about human psychology that most people don't realize. When you have zero savings, every dollar feels precious because losing it means you're one step closer to financial disaster. But when you have $10,000 saved, individual dollars start feeling less precious, which actually makes you more willing to spend money on things that could increase your earning potential. This seems counterintuitive, but it's incredibly important. Before you know it, you're on a path toward real financial independence, not because you got lucky or inherited money, but because you developed the habits and mindset that make wealth building inevitable. The transformation that happens when you save your first $10,000 isn't just about the money itself. It's about becoming the type of person who has money saved. And that identity shift creates ripple effects that extend into every corner of your life in ways you probably never expected. Here's what I want you to understand. $10,000 isn't just a number in your bank account. It's a complete psychological transformation that touches every aspect of your life, from sleeping better at night to walking into job interviews with actual confidence instead of desperation. This milestone creates a domino effect that most people never see coming. If you're currently staring at a bank balance that looks more like a phone number from the 1950s, don't panic. The path forward is simpler than you think. Start small.
Maybe it's $25 a month. Maybe it's $50. The amount doesn't matter as much as the consistency. If this helped you see money differently, if it gave you a clearer picture of what's actually possible, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next one, and give this video a thumbs up if you found value in it. It helps more people discover this information, and honestly, more people need to hear it, because the financial advice industry spends way too much time talking about million-dollar portfolios and retirement planning for people who are already wealthy, and not enough time talking about the fundamentals that actually change lives for everyday people. That's what we're doing here, cutting through the noise, focusing on what actually works, building financial security one calm, steady decision at a time. I'll see you in the next one.